Hello everybody, Larry Young here again with another segment of OLaMan, Living Life with Purity. And today I want to tell you about an old friend of yours that you never knew you had. And this was a gentleman that was very, very instrumental in me being able to maintain the property in Rome City for a full decade against all odds. This gentleman grew up in the area, and he knew the property like the back of his hand because he used to run around in the tunnels and all throughout the building, helping out the maintenance guys when he was a child. He and his friends after school, this was a place that they would come to because they could hang out with the men and they could learn things. And his name was Norbert Chester. We all called him Nick because who in their right mind wants to be called Norbert all day long? But Nick took the nickname Nick, obviously, because he didn't be riddled as a child with all kinds of teasing and things like that, and but we all kind of joked with him about it. If there was anything I had an issue with him, I would always call him and say, "Hey Norbert, I need you," and he would come around. He knew it was a serious moment at that time, but great sense of humor, tremendous amount of charity in this man. So let me tell you about him. Nick was one of those people that kind of came with the property when I bought it in the year 2000. And he was sort of not really a jack of all trades. He was a machinist by trade. He had worked at General Electric in Fort Wayne, and he would run all about the buildings and fixing motors and running pipe and things like that that needed to be done if they were setting up a new machine. So he did all sorts of things throughout his life. And when he got done, he came to Sylvan Springs and was a permanent fixture there. He did everything from helping me run pipe or make fittings and things like that. He knew how to run all the tools, and he could make just about anything we needed, and we needed a lot. And so he put a lot of time in there with the thinking and the planning and the orchestrating and pulling on what he knew as a child and trying to make things work in the new age, 50-some years later. So when Nick was a child, his parents were in the area, and he and his buddies after school would run over to Knipe Springs at that time, and they would meet up with a couple of fellows there, and one of them was John Burguy, and the other one was John Hastrider. And these two gentlemen ran the property inside and out, and at this property there were huge, huge boilers and a huge mechanical room. You can imagine this building here in the facilities, about 180,000 square feet of maintenance to be taken care of. And it was old, and it was always not in the best of shape, being used and run that many years at full tilt. So it was always a constant state of maintenance going on. But Nick and his buddies would always be looking for something to do after school, so they'd always run over to Knipe Springs, and the two Johns, as they called them, would put them to work doing something. And sometimes it was helping them out in the machine shop, helping them just hold the oil dispenser while they were turning and cutting a new tool or something on the lathes. The boys would learn how these machines worked and how things were done. And ultimately, this led Nick to a path of being a machinist in his own right as a professional career. So the things he learned as a child stayed with him. He found an attractiveness to being able to make things out of a hunk of metal. And now all of a sudden we've got this fitting that's been bored out and fits and replaces what we couldn't get. We had to make it. So Nick had this sense of a self-reliance that was perfectly suited for me and my needs and my disposition too, because I didn't really take excuses very well. I said, well, if we don't know how to do it, we just have to figure it out and let's get it done. And if somebody else can do it, we can do it too. We just have to learn how to do it. And Nick fell right into that sort of type of leaning. And he didn't complain about anything. If something catastrophic broke, he would never cry and run around with his emotion showing. He'd say, Larry, we got a problem, and I think I know how we're going to take care of it. And I really like that in Nick. And so Nick was one of those steady players I mean, his foot could be on fire, but he'd never let you know it. He would just say, well, there it goes again. And he'd walk on over and try to take care of the problem, whatever it was. So nice, cool head, didn't lose it when things were falling apart. He stayed together. So, and that was what was needed, because we had a lot of people at that time trying to keep this ship moving, and most of them didn't know what they were doing. They were always looking for some sort of direction as to what to do and how to do it. And Nick was very good at that, helping me out with me learning from him, and also me teaching him, and then him being able to pass that knowledge on to the next person. So he was a good car to have on my train. And I think without Nick and several of the other people, my tenure at the Rome City property would have ended much earlier, and we would never have seen what we're seeing today. So everybody owes Nick a great debt of gratitude. He's one of these people you'll never really hear about unless I tell you about him, so that's what I'm going to do today. Well, Nick and the other boys would go and they'd hang out with these two Johns, helping them either in the machine shop, and most of the time they always needed to keep filling up the boilers with coal. There was big coal chutes, and the coal trucks would come and dump these big truckloads of coal, but it all had to be manually shoveled into the boilers. Well, the two Johns weren't fools. They knew that these kids were coming around in the afternoon, so they'd always time their work for restoking the boilers for when these boys came. And so they figured out between them that 25 cents on a root beer went a long way with keeping these boys motivated to shovel coal each day. So each day, Nick and his buddies would go over and shovel coal, and they'd be paid a nice round quarter and a nice cold glass of fresh root beer that was made on the property. So these guys had a real knack for making beer, regular beer, so making sarsaparilla root beer. Now, these days, I don't even think you can buy sarsaparilla root beer. I think somebody determined that it was carcinogenic or had some sort of ill effect. So I don't know if you can really buy sarsaparilla root beer anymore. But these boys grew up on sarsaparilla root beer and 25 cents and hard work. And they loved every minute of it, because they got to hang out with the guys, and they got to, see how machines worked, and they were, treated, like men for a few hours, and as long as they kept shoveling. So, and there was a lot of coal they had to shovel each day. But these kids never really complained about it, but their mothers got wind of what was going on, so they always made them have to change their clothes when they came home from school so they could get on their work dungarees and these overalls that they would put on to go over and shovel coal, so they didn't have all this coal dust coming back in the house. They could pull these overalls off and still have their other clothes clean underneath it. So they had their work outfits, and they had their lockers. They were part of the team, and but these 10 and 12-year-old boys were over there being taught how to be men, how to do real work. And so it always stayed with Nick, and this sense of self-reliance was always about there, and this calm steadiness in the storms. And we had a lot of storms. Oh my gosh, there was always an emergency of some sort coming up. And but Nick and I and a couple of the other guys would powwow on it a little bit, and we would figure out what to do. Well, Nick had a wife, a partner in crime in his life, and her name was Sue. And Nick and Sue ended up having 3 children of their own. And these kids grew up under Nick and Sue, and they became a good Catholic family. But for some reason, that just wasn't enough. And so what Nick and Sue did was they got involved with being foster parents. And they ended up taking on foster children to help them out, to get them over the hump either with their parents that were having a tough time. Well, Nick and Sue would take these kids in. And sometimes they never got placed back. Sometimes they just stayed with them until they graduated and moved on in their own lives. But Nick and Sue would take these foster kids in. Well, I always knew it was a lot of kids that they took care of. I didn't know how many. And when I was looking through Nick's obituary the other day, I was amazed. I guess I wasn't amazed. I was just astounded and not surprised, because this is how Nick and Sue were. But they fostered 69 children in their lifetime. And I think each and every one of those 69 kids probably still refers to them as being mom and dad. And when I looked at the number of people that they had just in the obituary that I know will be at Nick's funeral service next month, but they can get them all in from all over the country, I think this is going to be one big party, because with these 69 kids, all these mixed races, all these mixed economic situations that they've graduated into, I think it's going to be amazing storytelling time, and I want to be there for it. And but Nick and Sue just did an awful lot. They were always there for me at the property. If I wanted to go home for a weekend and I'd been working hard and my wife Lynn couldn't come down to see me, I would try to go home at least, one weekend a month. It was a terrible ordeal for us both to be separated like that. And it, I think I paid the price on that pretty badly, and so did Lynn. And I'm really sorry about that. But Nick knew how important it was, so he would always come to me on a Thursday and say, "Hey, Larry, I think you need to go home this weekend. You've been here too many weekends in a row." And I'd say, well, if I had someone to cover the place, he says, "I will be here each day." He says, "I'll come over and unlock it in the morning. I'll meet with the visitors. I'll do all those things." Because Nick was the ultimate tour guide of that property. He knew the place like the back of his hand. He'd grown up there. He knew all the sisters. He knew all the people. He knew all the visitors. Well, many of the visitors he knew by name, and could tell the stories of these people coming in. And but Nick was just that guy. He just had this, he was a veritable garbage can of knowledge about that property. And if anyone ever wanted to know anything about that place or its history or the town or this entire area, Nick knew all about it. And he was the great person to go to as a source of information. And there were a couple things that I found out along the way that he thought were fact, we found out were folklore. But when we was able to show that it was folklore and not fact, he did change the history diatribe that he would give then when people came in. And he was always learning and always changing the story and making sure we got the facts right. So one of the stories that a lot of people always wanted to say was that Dixie Crosby, Bing Crosby's wife, had been a regular visitor at the property, and she had some issues going on with her addictions and her physical health, and so she would come quite often to visit and take the waters and try to heal herself and get over some of these addictions, whether it be drinking or pills or whatever was going on at that time in her life. But a lot of people had come to the conclusion that Bing Crosby was also here an awful lot. And we were able to put that notion aside. Bing Crosby never came to Rome City with his wife. He probably paid a lot of bills, but he never came here with her. And we know this because not only Nick was on hand and would have known, but another woman, John Hastrider's wife, Loretta. John and Loretta had a funny sort of sense of humor too, and they had what people today would call the hall pass. And that's that if a spouse has ever had a chance to go on a date with a celebrity of their dreams or something like that, their spouse had already said, "Yeah, okay, if Clark Gable is going to take you out to dinner, that's fine by me. Go with Clark Gable." Like never a chance, it was ever going to happen. But they just call it this hall pass. Well, Loretta Hastrider's hall pass was Bing Crosby. And Loretta was a daily worker at the property. She worked in the kitchen and she worked about, fixing up guest rooms and things like that as a younger woman. And when I was talking with her and Nick one time, just to corroborate about the Bing Crosby story, she says, "Larry," she says, "Bing Crosby was never here." And I said, "Well, how do you know that?" She says, "I've been a lifetime Bobby Soxer. If Bing Crosby had been here, I would have known about it, and he would have had lipstick on his chin because I would have been kissing him all over because he was my hall pass. And I just laughed, and Nick was sort of stunned by that because we never would have expected that out of Loretta Hastrider. But that was her hall pass, and she was certain that Bing Crosby never been here because she would have known. And so we trusted her on that, and I think that was the truth. But Nick had to change his story about Bing Crosby having been to the property and won the testimony of Loretta Hastrider. But Nick and Sue and these 69 foster children, plus their 3 own, they did it all in a small, very modest home near the property. But when the kids were all gone and Nick was involved more with me at the property, as he was in his mid-60s, I think, at that time, and he would work over there as much as we needed him, sometimes as a volunteer, sometimes as paid, just depending on how much money I had in the bank at that time to help out. And if I ran out of money, Nick never ran out of time. He would still show up and do what was needed because it needed to get done. And so I really appreciated that about these two. There was never any time if I had to go or I needed them to go open the doors for an unannounced visitor that would show up. Maybe they traveled from halfway across the country and they wanted to come in and see the place. Nick would always make time to come on over and assist these folks. They would cancel their dinner plans and things like that in lieu of making sure that these visitors were taken care of. So a lot of people's personal lives were affected trying to take care of these visiting pilgrims throughout the years, but we did it gladly. And we did it because it needed to be done, and it was important to these visitors. And we thought, well, if we had no other mission, it was to be there for these folks when they showed up. And Nick and Sue were really, really good about that. And so there's a lot more stories about Nick and Sue and Carol and Ruby and, the other people that the Mary Parkers and the other folks who would come in and help. It was their thing. It was they all grouped together and they all said, this is what we're going to do, and if you're going to do it, I'm going to do it. So this sort of teamwork all came together, but they were all people that were pushing for the same goals. That was in trying to get one more person to know about the history of this place, what we believed and in our hearts knew had happened there with these apparitions that we have to keep saying are alleged apparitions. I don't think there's anything to be alleged about this at all. I think it actually did happen, and Our Lady is calling for the children of America to lead the world by the purity of their lives. And if they want to see somebody that basically showcased that purity, it was Nick Chester. Nick never asked for anything. He always just wanted to help the next person up. So it's a great way to go through life. It was sad my last time I visited with Nick. His mind was fading. The dementia was coming in, but he did brighten up for a few moments and remembered me and remembered all the things we did, and a huge smile and a satisfactory grin kind of came across his face, and we both sort of shared that, and that was the last time I saw Nick. But Nick passed away here on September the 8th, and I'd spoken a little bit in one of the last segments there with Alex, talking about a dream I had where Nick came to me, and that was on the night between Sunday and Monday. So that was the night when it happened. I was looking back at my diary, and Nick came to me in a dream, and he said to me, he said, "Larry, it's more beautiful than you can imagine." And he was talking about heaven and the light of heaven and the feeling that was there. And it was on Tuesday then that I got the notice that Nick had passed away. I didn't hear anything on Monday, but it was on early Monday morning when I had this dream where Nick came to me. Just a short instance, but when I woke up from it, I realized, wow, that was Nick. And he must have been talking about heaven's light. And I just had the feeling that Nick had passed away. And Nick and Sue had been very, very interested in the story that I told about when I had my out-of-body experience in 2001 with Our Lady, when she showed me heaven's light. She didn't show me heaven. She just showed me the light so that I would know what it was that I was fighting for and what was important, what was at stake for millions of souls. And Nick had heard that, and he knew that the event was true because I had been there with several other people. I think there was probably more than a dozen other pilgrims came and witnessed the whole event. And I'll tell you about that one too. I think I've talked about it in earlier episodes, but I'll go back into it a little more deeply here in another segment. But Nick knew that it was true, and I think he'd been looking forward to this as he was declining, and he would have his moments of clarity with this dementia going on. His wife Sue had passed away last year about this time, so it's almost a full year to the day when Sue passed away. Just had to think about that. And but I know that Nick was thinking about that, what heaven was going to be like. And I really appreciate having had that influence of that dream this past week, because it's been on my mind, and I wanted to tell you folks. But heaven is real, it's waiting, and it's worth fighting for. It's worth standing up for, and it's worth thinking about it. Not so much each day, but just to realize that you're not being lied to in these things. You're not being sold a bill of goods. Heaven is there. Jesus and God are real. The Holy Family is there. And we're all invited to be a part of that. And Nick and his wife Sue, through their lifelong commitment with these foster children and the way they went about their mission even afterward, with helping out with the protection and the showcasing of the Sylvan Springs to our visitors, Nick was a fixture in that place. You can find him. He did a great YouTube interview way back, I think that was in 2009 or 2010. A gentleman named Sean Mahoney came up here and did a wonderful set of interviews with 4 people that I put before him to talk about the history of the property and the calling of the devotion and all these types of things. I stayed out of it because at that time I had been tied up in the federal lawsuit, the RICO case, where I was being charged under the Federal RICO Act being a conspirator to try to steal the devotion to Our Lady of America. And that's one of the things that was the big problem with that lawsuit that took up over a decade of my life and stopped everything as far as the movement on this devotion. And it wasn't until that court case was won, and even 4 years after the court case was won, that the bishops would even look at this devotion again. There was just a lot of mud got thrown in the water, and it had to be cleared up. But Nick was one of those people that helped with the stability. When I had been run out of the property, he maintained a presence there to help with doing the tours and just constancy, because he knew it was important. And I told all the people when I got kicked out, I said, you need to keep going. Don't stop. This is important. If you need me, let me know, but I can't help you from here because I've been banned from the property. So they stood tall, and they kept going, and that was when, it was down to Ruby and Nick at that time. But they stayed strong, and they stayed steady in this, and Ruby's still going. I mean, my golly, I don't know what's going to take that woman out, but we'll find out one of these days. But a lot of people need to be thankful to Nick Chester and all these people who helped, hold the fort in this time, because it was a battle. And anyone who thinks that these things come without collateral damage, you just don't know what it is you're talking about, because the collateral damage that happened with all these people trying to keep the faith on this, it cost us all an awful lot. And it hurt, but we knew what the price was worth. And Nick was one of those people that knew what the price was worth, and he helped educate me about some of the values and being selfless in your regard for other people. Just give them as much as you got. They need your shirt, give them the shirt. They need your shoes, give them the shoes. That was Nick. And we all need to be a little bit like Nick these days. So say a prayer for Nick Chester, Norbert by name. His funeral will be on the 14th of October coming up. They have quite a job of getting all these people together from all over the country. So I applaud them for that, and I'm looking forward to it. But in the meantime, I love you, and I'll be back.